And welcome to Friday DC Signal to Noise, the live stream here. We'll get started with the podcast just a little bit, but hey, welcome, Jim Wiesmeyer.
I'm glad to be here.
Right.
At least we've got the USDA reports out of the way.
We do have the USDA reports out of the way and some helpful news out of USDA reports.
Yeah,
so
it's kind of bullish.
It's more than kind of bullish for beans. It's been a nice bounce today. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I sent you my list earlier, Jim. You and I haven't chatted much today, so I will tell you we'll go a little bit deeper on those subjects than what I had notes on there, as you can well imagine. But
sure,
we'll get to that. As always, folks, if you'd like to join in the conversation, drop us a note in the chat on Facebook there, and we'll answer your questions live. And in fact, Jim, we're going to circle back to some stuff that came up from last week in the chat.
Sure.
And some emails we got. So anything to add to the list?
Not that I think. Well, there's been development on the aid package. Supposedly, the administration, some in the administration, want to up it to 1.8 trillion.
Yeah, some, but not the Senate Republicans, which we'll talk about.
Well, not enough of the Senate Republicans.
Right.
This could be the White House and Treasury Department negotiating without McConnell, because he said the votes aren't there in the Senate for that.
Yeah, so we'll talk about all that here in the podcast. So let's get it started. Again, a reminder, drop us a note, drop questions as we talk here. And if you're listening, well, we'll get to that once we're recording. So here we go. In 3, 2, 1. Welcome to DC Signal to Noise on this Friday. I'm John Harris, joined as always by Jim Wiesmeyer from Pro Farmer. And Jim, let's get right to a long list. We're going to talk the latest on coronavirus aid package, of course, the election, the VP debate, the upcoming possible, maybe presidential debates. Secretary Perdue hit with a Hatch Act violation. More on, we had a WASD report today, and we're going to answer some listener mail, if you will. We'll get to all that in today's show. But first, let's start with that coronavirus aid package, Jim, because there's been some motion today. I don't know that I'd call it movement, because it's been a while since we've seen any true movement on this, but at least there's some signals to report on this. Yeah.
Well, first on the timeline, Majority Leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, Republican from Kentucky, just flat out said today he doesn't think that a final package will be done, before the elections. And most people, I think, believe that now. In fact, many believe that Pelosi is dragging this out because she doesn't want to give Trump any chance of a victory heading into November 3rd elections. And you hear that from both, some Democrats and Republicans. So let's hope that that's bipartisan response. As far as late developments, it looks like Treasury Secretary Mnuchin has floated a $1.8 trillion package with Pelosi. That would mean that they're $400 billion off of what the Democrats want. But again, McConnell says he just does not have the votes, at least enough Republican votes in the Senate. And I don't think that he wants to put up a bill that has more Democrats signing off of it than Republicans. So it's murky, John.
Yeah, and there have been a lot of murky signs from Mitch McConnell this week. I mean, he hasn't been involved in any of the talks. It's been between Pelosi and Mnuchin. So we have no real sign of what he wants in the deal other than a smaller deal, or even if he's going to support what if Steve Mnuchin signs off on a deal and President Trump signs off on a deal. We have no indication on whether or not Mitch McConnell will actually call it for a vote in the Senate at this point. So still very questionable, as you note, on whether or not there will be enough Senate Republicans on board with this to get it all the way through Congress. If I could dial back just a little bit, when you were talking about Nancy Pelosi, Speaker Pelosi, earlier this week, I've got to admit I was a little troubled by her comments that she wasn't going to approve a smaller stopgap aid package because it just meant that Trump wanted to get out letters with checks, which I agree in the notion that we shouldn't be spending billions, if not trillions of dollars for the president to send out letters just before the election. But if it's desperately needed, why do you hold it up because of that?
Well, it is all politics all the time, literally right now before the election. But she also said that she was given mixed signals on whether or not she would finally accept a skinny bill, like a piecemeal bill. Now, the latest she's saying is the only way that she'll commit to any standalone bill is if she has a commitment that they will also take up a broader package later. And at least that's the latest that I can gather, from her. The airlines desperately need money, so all this is left hanging, John. So it's led to more questions, than answers, because that's politics.
Yeah, well, and certainly the airlines and the long-term unemployed are two areas that need to be addressed immediately, and certainly need to be done sooner rather than later. But of course, both sides see it as well. If they sign off on those two, get that done now, they've got no leverage for their other items post the election.
Yes, I agree. I can see both sides, but we've been going on pretty long under this big package, and that's why I think it ups the odds that I don't think Pelosi wants anything until after the election, because they're getting more and more confident that they're going to win a trifecta: the White House, House, and perhaps the Senate. And if that's the case, that's all the leverage they need.
Yeah, well, and they're also looking at the calendar, and that date is closer now. Though, again, as we've discussed, even if they do have a good day on November 3rd, we're looking at February before you see checks go out. That's an awfully long time, again, for the airlines and the long-term unemployed.
Yes, but even on some parts of a grand package, if they had one, they wouldn't go out right away anyway. So I think we're clicking down to where this wouldn't help all that much to begin with anytime soon. But we'll see. They've got the PPP program in place as far as the dynamics. They can tweak it a little bit to make it more manageable, out quicker acceptances, and checks can be written pretty quick. So some can and some cannot, relative to implementation of any grand package.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about the election, and starting with the vice presidential debate this week. We won't spend a lot of time talking about it because I don't know that there's a lot to talk about it, other than it did harken back to more normal times, which I think is what other than the fly has been the highlight of that debate.
Yeah, well, we fixate on funny things,
Yes.
but what it showed me is that both Vice President Pence, and Kamala Harris, both articulated in a better way what Trump and Joe Biden did not do in their first debate. They articulated better what both parties wanted. They didn't answer a couple of questions, and that's another angle that
they didn't answer a lot of questions.
Yes.
In fact, I'd say they answered very few questions. They answered the questions that they wanted to hear, not the questions they were asked.
Yes, absolutely. So this would be where a town hall, I think, might be a good approach, because the questions would come from, quote, real people rather than more politically based, moderators. And I always like town halls better anyway.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's harder to blow off a voter than it is a moderator,
Yes.
which both sides, again, did Tuesday. And I get the position Mike Pence was in. He's got to obfuscate because he can't vary from the Trump message at all. So he's got to stay inside that box. But I thought Kamala Harris avoided questions that she didn't really need to avoid, and certainly should have known were coming. Certainly the Supreme Court question she should have seen coming and should have had an answer for, rather than avoiding that. Yeah.
Well, she wanted to make no major faux pas, and that's why most people say she didn't. So they're playing defense right now relative to their lead of almost 10 percentage points. At least that's what you hear from the so-called political experts in this town. One suggestion, of course they'll never do it, is if a candidate did not answer a question, they keep on asking questions to the other candidate, and then we might get some answers.
Yeah, indeed, and I get that the Harris Biden team don't want to box themselves in on the Supreme Court, but again, they knew the question was coming. They should have had something prepared, something along the lines of the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett still hasn't played out. We don't know what the end result is going to be there yet. We aren't changing the number off the table as of right now, but we haven't made any sort of decision because we don't know how the process has played out.
Well, as I said on AgriTalk this morning, the box that the Democrats are in relative to packing the Supreme Court is if they say no, then it upsets more than a few of their far left, members. If they say yes, then it may upset whatever independent voter is out there that wants to see balance, a bipartisan fervor in Washington. So what they have done is what politicians love to do. They just punt. And it has shades of, even though I think this is far more important topic than the waivers of the RFS and what's going to be the mandate for 2021 corn-based ethanol. But this is what EPA is doing. They're just trying to punt those two, key issues until after the election. Very similar, very similar.
Yeah, but in the Supreme Court case, by not even addressing it the way they're handling it, they're not addressing it at all, and they're just continuing to drag it out as a message in the news on this campaign. Why not admit the obvious that it's at least under consideration, but no decision has been made yet because they don't know what this process is, and end it from being dragged out multiple days in the media.
Yeah, they should do what, again, a lawmaker from both political parties usually does on a sensitive issue. They should say, we're studying this. We've got a commission underway, and because this is not an easy decision, we're going to look at the pros and the cons on this, and we'll let you know as soon as that report is done and we've had time to analyze it, which would be after the election. But at least it would be a better argument than some of the things that, they're saying that, the focus would only be on that, because now by doing that, the focus is on it, John.
Indeed. Now let's talk about the election in general. I want to get your sense of where it stands this week, Jim, just to frame it a little bit. The 538 average of polls is now showing Biden plus 10.2. So certainly some momentum in the polling that direction. But what's the sense that you have on the ground?
Well, it depends on who you talk with. At least people that they still remember 2016, although Joe Biden is not Hillary Clinton. The Republicans that I talk with, both from an analytical end and from the lawmaker end, say that they're not adequately capturing the Republican votes. And two, this is very close still in the swing. In the swing states that will really decide the electoral college vote, John.
One difference I'm noticing now between 2016 and now is that there seems to be a very real sense of fear in Republican incumbents who are up for races now that their polling doesn't look good going into the November 3rd election. And that seems to be very different from some of the optimism we saw going into 2016.
Well, that could perhaps signal that Trump is doing worse after the debate, and he's pulling them down. That's what one possible suggestion there. And if that's the case, then the trifecta could be coming into play. I don't think there's a chance that the Republicans can have a trifecta, but there is a chance, or very light chance on the Republican side, but there is a chance of, for the Democrats to, get the White House, retain the House, and get the Senate, especially if Biden does better in some of these battleground states, because it will go down, down ticket.
Yeah, indeed. So it's going to continue to be interesting to watch and see if either side can come up with something that will significantly move the needle in their direction. So far we haven't seen either side really make a move of their own that does that. I think it's been mostly reaction to moves that Trump has made that have raised more questions about where the current administration is headed.
Well, this is what has some people really fearful, because if if there is a trifecta on the part of the Democrats, and if there's, several ifs here, so I acknowledge that, and if they pack the court, and if they go after two more states, Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico, and if they do away with those, filibuster in the Senate, you've got one party rule as far as you can see.
Yeah, and especially rural voters, I think, tend to reject that. I think they're even broad-based. There is a sentiment that even if you do support one political party over the other, you'd like to see some opposition to either party in government, and we've seen that play out time and time again in elections.
It's called checks and balances,
right? Exactly, and we've seen the electorate push back when one party gets to be in control, and I think some of that plays into this election cycle as well.
Yes.
It may overplay into this election cycle. We'll see what happens November 3rd. Another interesting twist in this week, in fact, just happening today. Speaker Pelosi putting together a commission on the 25th Amendment. I don't know about you, Jim, but this sounds like all bunches of noise to me.
It's about as close to 100% noise as you're going to get. She just wants to get under Trump's skin, and it has, and it will continue. It's going, even if passed by the House, which anything can pass the House if she wants it to. It wouldn't do anything in the Senate. It's a signal vote, and it also brings up the health issue that the Democrats should be playing on, because I think healthcare, wherever, all my emails, if I had to boil them down to the biggest issue, it's healthcare, and that's related to the COVID-19 as well, the need for pharmaceuticals and vaccines, and they know that. And by tying the suspect of is Trump up to the job relative to what we don't know about his health, when was the last negative test that he had, this brings their election ploy into play. So it's politics.
Well, and some erratic behavior on the president's part since returning from Walter Reed Hospital, which again plays into that narrative. And because they aren't releasing information about his health and his health care, it leaves wide open for speculation of what may be causing that those flurry of tweets and
it's Trump
videos,
good or bad, whether it helps him or hurts him, and primarily it hurts him. You saw that after the vice presidential debate. Most pollsters that I talked with thought that Pence won, not by a lot. But what does Trump do? The very next morning, he doesn't let it alone. He immediately says that he doesn't want to take part in a virtual debate that the commission set up for the 22nd. And I think that they didn't give Trump and the Republicans adequate lead time to respond to that. So he was upset, and we know what Trump does when he's upset.
Well, it really gives is an unforced error that it is an advantage to the Biden team, because I think it's very unlikely that we'll see another debate at this point. I could be wrong, but the winds seem to be headed towards that direction. And if the polling is to be believed, Biden doesn't need the next debate, but Trump does.
Absolutely.
He needs a big moment, a big free moment, because he doesn't have the campaign cash either, to really turn the tide, and he's turning away that opportunity. Well,
with 70 million people watching a debate, I mean, where's he going to get that? He can have all the rallies that he wants. So it's a forced error. Just stupid. It's just, I don't know what other way to say it. I understand that he doesn't like virtual, debates. I understand that the Republicans really don't like the moderator that was set up for the town hall session, the C-SPAN guy, because he used to intern for Biden and was in the media operation of Senator Kennedy. Now he's on C-SPAN, he's well thought of, but anything that smacks of partisanship should be called into question. So I have to look at that commission a little bit more for the next time we have this. I think that they made some blunders as well.
Yeah, although I would think that, despite what they're saying publicly, I would think that the Trump campaign would look a little bit favorably on the next moderator, just because there's nothing in what we see out of him that's going to show that he's going to push either side terribly hard. So I think that would be a welcome opportunity for the Trump campaign.
Yeah, well, there should be a debate, whether it's virtual or not. And by not doing that, he needs, like you said, he needs debates to convince, to not only to bring out more of his voters, but also to convince that 6 to 8% of truly independent voter who's still waiting, by the way, out there. I think it's noise of people who say everyone has committed their vote at this time. No, that's not the case.
I hear you, Jim, but I just
noise.
I don't know how you could not have an opinion on this race at this point in time.
You don't understand in the mind of an independent. They're fearful at both ends. They're fearful of one party rule. They're fearful of not having both political parties truly articulate what they're going to do the next 4 years. And they're waiting. They're waiting for both sides to articulate that. And we don't know. We don't know.
And I understand that. I get that completely. And I think there are a lot of people who are not satisfied with either option we have here. But I think deep down, most people have decided which option they're going to go for, whether they see them as a good option or not.
We'll see.
We'll see. In the meantime, we've had nearly 7 million ballots cast already.
That's another element. Yes.
Yeah. So the clock is quickly running out for both candidates to even have an impact on this race because of all of that early voting.
Well, Biden said this sometime today that he wants to run up the votes to make sure there's no doubt on election night or the next day of who won that race. So I think that's what they're going after now. They're trying to run up the score.
Well, and quite frankly, if you're in the Biden camp, you really need to do that because as much if you can have the vote decided in the Biden-Harris favor on the night of November 3rd, it takes away all this other circus that we've been hearing about that's possible in the weeks afterwards. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if it's noise or not. It could very well be signal.
Echo. Yeah. We'll know I think early on election night on some key Senate races, South Carolina, if Lindsey is in trouble, that could be a signal. North Carolina, now we have a sexual incident on the part of the Democrat in that race, Cunningham. But Florida, Florida's really close again. If Biden can lose Florida and still win the presidency, Trump can't. So we're going to watch certain counties, and you don't have to watch the whole state, certain counties in Florida, and so that'll be key. So, but if Trump doesn't win Florida, it's over early.
Yeah, I mean that's a no-brainer there.
And Ohio,
and Ohio, and it looks like Pennsylvania could be an earlier result than we thought. And if we know Pennsylvania early in the evening, then the election may very well be called, or may very well be foretold at that point.
Then the commentators will go, what path does Trump have for re-election? Because it'll narrow. And that's the signals we'll be watching for one way or the other.
Yeah, you and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, but again, Eastern time zone, as you talked about Florida, although I don't know how much we're going to know out of Florida, but for me, the real key is Pennsylvania. You're right. Ohio is now becoming more of a signal in that Eastern time zone. And then when you get to the Central time zone, obviously Wisconsin and Michigan are the states to watch there, and Iowa.
Yes.
Even if not just the presidential race, but the Senate race in Iowa, as you mentioned, the Senate race with Lindsey Graham. I think either one of those could tell the story of the presidential election very early.
Now, in the latest poll I remember seeing in Iowa, Teresa Greenfield was up 5 percentage points. Now, that means she's increasing her lead, and that should be outside the margin of error. That's not a good signal for Senator Ernst. But again, we've got weeks to go, and things can happen. They also had a debate last night, so we'll have to see the ramifications of their debate.
Yeah, indeed. So, well, let's move on. Unless you got something else you want to hit on the election.
No.
All right. Well, let's talk about
Just
Secretary.
vote.
Let's talk about Secretary Sonny Perdue, which I guess still plays into the election. But the Office of the Special Counsel yesterday hit Sonny Perdue with a letter saying he's got to repay the U.S. Treasury for a trip he took to, I believe it was North Carolina, on
August
24th, a food box program event where he started off talking about how great President Trump has been for agriculture and that agriculture should continue to support him. And the Office of Special Counsel said you can't do that. It's a violation of the Hatch Act, and you need to repay the taxpayers for the expenses of that trip.
Yes. He and others in the administration, but Sonny Perdue was testing that, I think, over the last few months, and he should have been caught for that one. Let me just give you perspective. When I first came to town in the mid 70s, there was a overall media person at USDA called Joe McDavid, and very few people would remember him in the listenership or the viewership. But he was harangued the press people if they put almost any mention of the current administration in a press release. We have gone far from that. Obama, every USDA press release had something about the Obama administration in the release. Sonny Perdue just stretched it, and he was caught, and I think rightfully so myself, so pay up.
Indeed, he's going to have to write a not insignificant check there to pay for that travel. Checking in with the chat here just real quickly. First of all, Pat saying, "Hey Jim, you're the other person who acknowledges that the biggest problem on the farm is cost of health insurance." Indeed, it's probably more acute on the farm than it is any place else in America.
Wherever, when I went out to speak, that was always the topic that people asked me about first. And when I got off the podium, they would tell me their personal stories, and some of which were very sad about the amount of money they had to pay, the deductions that sounded like a baseball salary, you know what I mean, of what you had to pay. So yes, and it should be logical, but it isn't in this town because we get so weedy here in other issues. But you don't have to go too far out of the beltway to know that healthcare is indeed the number one issue, especially in rural countryside, not only because of the price, but availability, where the hospitals are, where the doctors are, the need for broadband and healthcare. It's getting worse rather than better. So definitely. And I'm surprised at both candidates who haven't really hit on this. Now, the Democrats have more than the Republicans on this, and then they'll usually get into defeating Obamacare or trying to, take apart Obamacare. And the Republicans do not have what many believe to be an adequate, reply, to that. But bottom line,
in two debates so far, they've had no reply, which is just, it's stunning. And they could have a very good defense if they would come forward with a plan that provides for healthcare, provides for pre-existing conditions. But instead, they've got nothing to shut down the line of attack from Democrats.
And we saw the healthcare issue in the 2018 elections was number one issue in the polls afterwards of what generated the votes, and two, what the Democrats led with throughout the 2018 election campaign. So that should not have been forgotten, but I think it was, unbelievably so. So yes, healthcare easily, to me, number one, with its corollaries, COVID-19, the need for pharmaceuticals, the need for a vaccine. Then you go into the how did a referendum on Trump, the way he did it, how he did it, etc. That's all comes into play with that healthcare issue. And COVID, the fear is definitely rising. I will tell you from a personal basis, not me, but my family. My brother-in-law just yesterday found out that he has COVID-19, and my sister probably has it. So, but it's ironic. They worried more before the test than after because the fear there.
The unknown,
the fear of the unknown. Now they know what they're dealing with, but this thing is rampant, and it has to be dealt with. And that's why I like some of the things that have been generated, the clear signals that we got from Trump's escapade with it was the use of some Regenerons and things like that. They're fairly effective. So let's hope that they get the authorization to pump them out to every American, because it went a long ways.
Yeah, well, and also do the efficacy testing and the side effects testing to make sure that it is safe in all cases.
Absolutely.
Yeah, your family doing all right so far?
I haven't called her today, but I heard that, they called his doctor, my brother-in-law's doctor. As an aside here, he did not lose his sense of humor, because he told my nephew to call me up and say he wanted to visit me. that's my brother-in-law. Once I heard that, I said, he's okay for now.
He's doing all right.
They're just, they've been told to check their oxygen, to get that tool that you can get at CVS or Walgreens and things like that, and watch if he tends to cough more, watch the fever and things like that. But they prescribe no drugs, and just monitor yourself. So let's hope that's okay, because he is in that age bracket. He's 83 and my sister's 76. So they're in that age bracket, but both of them are thinner, so they don't have the weight problem I do. But it was brought home to me, and they went to a wedding about a week ago. So I think it was probably from that. So be careful, audience, when you go to any multiple event, to bring your mask. That's just constantly, I've been told that.
All right. Pat also asking, are we doing Signal to Noise on election night? And you betcha we're doing Signal to Noise on election night. It's going to be a special edition. We'll stream it here on the same Facebook pages. We'll also be on agweb.com at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central. Again, we don't know what we're going to know at that point.
No.
But Jim and I will give you the best analysis of what we've got up to that point.
Yes.
And in fact, Jim, you and I are going to be commenting and doing analysis with text on agweb.com throughout the night. So watch for that, and then tune in for the live broadcast at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central. And we may have some surprise guests.
Some surprise guests. And I'm going to David Wasserman of the Cook Political Report. He's the House editor.
Going to be a surprise.
No, I'm not going to. Did I say that? I'm going to say that in an article in the New York Times this week, he pulled out 10 counties that can serve as a barometer for the presidential race. So I want to construct a little table and have us both monitor those counties throughout the U.S. to see as a signal. Of course, I would love to have David come on every once in a while. So now it may not be a surprise. It's going to be hard to get him because he's a consultant to NBC News on election night. So I don't think that we're going to be able to pull him away. But we've got some tools that we're going to hopefully use, and then monitor the best of some of the tried and true analysts on television or cable news from both political ends to see what they have identified as well, in order to bring any signals of where we can project. We're not going to project every state, but if we can see some trends here that we could serve as a bellwether. John.
Yeah, indeed. And we'll be reaching out to some other folks as well, see if they want to join in on that conversation. So join us.
Yes, and we'll talk about ag races where the networks typically do not, especially at the representative level, like Colin Peterson's, race against Michelle Fischbach. So we'll look closely at that one.
Yeah, indeed. We'll be following that race as key. The race to replace Pat Roberts at Kansas.
Yes.
We'll be following the Iowa Senate race and a lot of other key ag
all
races,
of which are very close right now. They're very close.
Indeed. But before we get to Wazzy and China, let's do, since we're on mailbag anyways, let's hit a little bit of mailbag issues. First of all, I appreciate the emails and messages that we got after last week's show. Some really thoughtful messages to us, starting with an email we got, Jim, about what we said about Colin Peterson last week. And again, we said at the time, I want to reemphasize that our comments were what his loss would mean for what the impact would be on agriculture. We realize there are other factors in this election, but you and I look at all things through the lens of the impact on agriculture, and that's what we were doing.
Absolutely.
He is very impactful in the entirety of Congress on issues of importance to agriculture.
Formidable force.
Yes. But I think the writer made a good point about the
Term
aging
limits.
leadership. Well,
Term limits.
and the
need
aging
for term
leadership in
limits
this country.
and aging lead. Yes, he did. He or she, I can't remember. I think it was he. Yeah, that is a point. When I first came to town, I didn't believe in term limits because I think experience really helps. But trust me, I changed my mind. I think there should be term limits. Bring in new blood. Don't have these institutional, people who tend to get, I'm not saying Collins this way, out of touch, or they have their favorite type programs. So I think new blood every once in a while is better than not.
And I'll tell you the same thing I tell my wife. We have term limits. The electorate just chooses to not enact them every 2 years when they have the opportunity.
That's true, but it tends to, when you're forced, I think you get a better lawmaker when there are term limits because they're not manning the phones seeking money all the time. That's another angle. They spend a lot of their time in the back room getting money, and especially representative every 2 years. Think about that, every other year they're actually on the phone getting money, and senators. So I've seen enough of that. I said, no, I want them focused on their job, and we can cuss and discuss what the term limit should be. But yeah, the writer had a good response, and that shows there's always two sides to any question. And I've said in copy, Michelle Fischbach is not as articulate in the ag policy area, but she is articulate in many other areas. She was, I know, the first woman lieutenant governor, or the leader of the Senate in the Minnesota legislature. That speaks a lot in and of itself right there. And she's very conversant under a number of issues. So it is what it is on that one. I think this is Collins' first time he's had a well-known person against a challenger, and ones that has generated a lot of money for them. And she's running neck and neck in the funding category. She's spending way more than Colin is at this particular time, but she has to. So I think this is going to be a race that will really be interesting. I will tell you the truth that my calls into Minnesota tell me that Colin's in trouble.
Yeah, and facing some political headwinds that don't necessarily directly pertain to him, but I mean, there is a sentiment in Minnesota to change government wholesale there.
They're upset. More than a few emails and calls into Minnesota people. They're upset at what happened to Minneapolis City with the looting, etc. They're upset with Governor Walz, who I know personally. I think he is articulate, but his handling of the mask and epidemic and things like that, there's more than a few that don't like the follow through. So that's what I'm hearing from Minnesota people. If you have other opinions, let us know.
Yes, please do. Email us at signaltonoise@farmjournal.com. Again, that's signaltonoise@farmjournal.com. Another email we got, you and I we actually were responding to some real-time comments last week about lightning fast CFAP2 payments.
Yeah.
And someone followed up with, well, that may be true for CFAP2, but WIP Plus, we're waiting and waiting and waiting. WIP Plus is obviously the disaster assistance program that addresses a whole laundry list of disasters, from flooding in various areas to hurricanes down in the Gulf Coast, and a few other disasters. And person writing in gave some very specific details about how they've been waiting for WIP Plus money
from Ohio.
From Ohio.
I can't say his name, but this one, John, gives me goosebumps because it shows the power of grassroots. This writer spent a lot of time detailing his situation, and I asked him if I could, without using his name, whether I could use it as a story on profarmer.com. I guess you used it on AgWeb. I'm not quite
Yes,
sure.
I did. Yeah.
Okay, good. Because you would not believe how much that generated to follow-up interview emails to me that confirmed what this individual said. I got a response from a USDA official about it, trying to not totally justify, but explain it a little bit more. Then Senator John Hoeven, Republican from North Dakota, who happened to have a meeting that the prior day, I believe, last week about this issue, told me that he would be checking into it. And we got other emails on that. Bottom line, WHIP Plus is a disaster in the implementation of it. And they need to improve it. And this is a bipartisan issue. And it looks like they will. And almost every emailer also asked me, will there be a WHIP Plus or whatever they want to call it for 2020 crops? Not just because of derecho, but because of what a lot of Midwesterners don't talk about, the problems in southern states, because they had weather-related issues as well that would fall under the 2020 WHIP Plus. So all that was as a result of a listener emailing us. So I applaud you for doing so. And to me, that's always my best stories. And that's why I still like to talk to and get from the farmers and ranchers, because they're some of the best stories.
Yeah, well, not only that, not only does it bring our attention to it, but it also opens the door for us to get the information. It's one thing for us to, send off an email and say, hey, what's going on with WHIP Plus? It's something completely different to say, hey, this grower is experiencing this. This is what they've told us.
Yes.
What's going on. That certainly opens more doors to get more information.
Yes. And the initial reaction that we had on the air that CFAP 2 was being paid out was definitely the clear signal that we got from, again, listeners, because USDA this week, as of the 6th, I think, of October, have put out $1.9 billion. So that I applaud USDA's Farm Service Agency for that. That's cranking it out pretty quickly.
And I'm just speculating here, Jim, but could the part of the difference be CFAP 2 is an initiative by the Trump administration to get money out in the hands of a very important electorate for the president, whereas the disaster payments are already structured. It's not something that the White House has been focused on because it's not their initiative. Does that play into this at all?
I wouldn't argue against that. Yeah. But there's a need for cash flow. Now, I know we've got soybeans, at 1060 now and things like that, but there's still a need for cash flow. It doesn't go up with one rally in the marketplace. But what I also found out in digging through this is that WHIP Plus implementation really varies by state and or county. Some people had a hellacious time filling out the farms, where in other instances, farmers told me their county people really helped them, fill out the farms, and in fact they got the money in fairly quickly. Boy, that wasn't the consensus viewpoint, but it did vary.
Yeah, well, as we've said all along, those county FSA people can really be key in making these programs go smoothly, and hats off to them for all they've had to do this year.
And in some cases, John, it was a lack of personnel in hiring, and we've heard that on other issues. So yes, the callers helped us identify a problem. USDA definitely is well aware of it now. When I get emails from high-level officials on it, and then from Senator John Hoeven, who usually delivers. He's pretty good when there's a problem. So I think the tension is now there. So now we're awaiting the signals for the response, John.
Yeah, so let us know if you start getting WHIP Plus checks in the next week or so.
Yes, definitely. Yes.
We'd love to hear about it. Shout out to Shay, who says hauling wagons and treating wheat in Illinois while listening. So appreciate that. Appreciate you listening in to us here. Last topic today, Jim. Let's end on a high note. WSDA and crop production reports today are good news for
soybean
especially
carryover.
Yeah,
290 million bushels. And some people are telling me it could go lower. About 20 million bushels are so lower in the resulting months here. On corn, they didn't change the yield, but they cut harvested acres down relative, helped out by the FSA data. So more data actually helped. It looks like it helped NAS. I think it was almost 1 million acres.
Yeah, they took 700,000 acres off the soybean crop. Yeah.
Okay. And then corn, the harvested acres went down, I think, almost a million, 900,000 or so.
Yeah, it was in the same neighborhood.
I'm just going from memory. On the China one, as we went on the air, I was on to a story that I haven't finalized yet. USDA kept the China corn imports from all origins at 7.0 million tons. Now, officially, that's what China's government kept with, and we reported on that this morning. So I don't know whether this is USDA bowing to that or not, but I will check into that.
Commitments are already above that, as we've discussed multiple times.
10 million tons.
Yeah.
On the books. Now, here's what I'm checking on. I won't name names because I don't like to do that, but there is a consulting firm out there that says USDA's corn export number has 14 million tons of U.S. corn exports in it to China. Now, we could have a different year basis. That's what I know. It's the corn marketing year. I don't know whether they're the same in China or not. But number one, I don't know whether that's true. But number two, I'm calling the World Board and I'm saying, if this consultant is right and you don't report that, that's not right. The public should know if that's 14.0 million tons, and if it's not, then they're wrong, and that should be known as well. Because this is a consultant who usually is pretty good, and that's why I took it to heart. And so we're going to be checking with the World Board on that one. They don't detail their export estimates by country, but in this case, I think they should with this out in the marketplace. I just want everybody to know to keep it fair. So we'll see.
Well, not only that, but delaying the news and being selective on when that purchase or those purchases are reflected in public data can have an outsized impact on how prices respond and when they respond.
Absolutely. The majority of the trade, I know Chip, Flory has talked about this on his marketing, programs. I think we got a 20-cent rally earlier on as a result of the expectations building that China was going to import more U.S. corn, and maybe most of that's factored in to the price. I think if Chip was on, he'd probably say that. But we'll see. I think he had a guest that actually said that. But I just want facts on the table, whether it's universal of where we're all dealing with the same information. So I think it's important to do further checks on their what is their specific estimate of the U.S. corn export estimate. How much of that is China? And if the 14.0 million tons is correct at all, that means a significant portion of the increase in U.S. corn exports is a result of China. Let's see if that's correct.
So we know where you're watching for signal next week.
Well, the one thing I'm really watching for the signal is the hearing of the Supreme Court Justice. That happens next week, right? On October 12th.
Yeah.
We're going to see if the Democrats overreach on that, if it's anywhere close to what it was before. So I think that's going to be a tonal type of a hearing on that one. And of course, the China one is going to be my focus later on today and probably Monday. It'll take that long to flush that story out. And we're going to have to see if this rally continues in the corn and soybean market. And I think wheat had an updraft as well. So at least this gives an opportunity. When you look at your deferred futures, they're getting to pretty good level. No way would I call them lofty, but anytime you give an opportunity
but
lock
they're getting
in
profitable.
Prices, yes, they're getting profitable. Absolutely. And I've always said I wish there could be a farm program in which we could have a true accountability factor that if the market, I know it gets you into basis and all that other stuff, I'm well aware of that, but if the market gave you the ability to lock in a price and you didn't take it, I'm not quite sure an income transfer payment is amenable in that situation, but that makes too much sense in this town. But I do fervently believe that if the marketplace doesn't give you an opportunity to lock in a profitable price. That's what safety nets are for. But I don't expect them to ever go that way, because this town has little accountability for both political parties. Look at our debt, 3.1 trillion dollars for fiscal year 2020. And it's going to go higher probably in 2021. So we've got some accountability to go through in the years ahead.
I think some people would say you just shredded MFP1 or not CFAP1. I mean,
it could be, but you've got to ask from an analytical perspective. If you get the price, should you get that taxpayer money? And I don't call them government payments. Yeah, I don't call them Trump payments. They're taxpayer payments, all of us.
Yeah.
Now, do farmers need the money? Absolutely. This is what a safety net. Agriculture is a strategic industry.
Well, we're going to pay it one way or another.
Absolutely. Absolutely. At the supermarket or in income transfer payments, or both in the case of our country. But when you go over to Europe, it's both too. Big time at the supermarket. But I just looking for, that was a farm policy perspective that I went on, but that's not laced with any politics, because the lawmakers from both political parties in farm states want to get out that income transfer. I don't blame them.
Well, yeah, I can't either, especially not in an election year.
Yes.
Do what benefits them. All right. Well, Jim, as always, a great conversation. A reminder, if you're listening to this podcast, we are now live streaming video. If you dare watch us while we record this podcast, check in on the AgriTalk Facebook page at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central on Fridays. That's when we record this, and you're welcome to join in on the conversation live. Thanks to all you folks who did give us questions and comments today.
And here's a request I have. I want to know from the listeners and viewers, what is anecdotal, I know, but are you seeing political signs there for the presidential race? And if so, who? Because just a few weeks ago when I was checking, there were far more Trump signs than Biden signs in farm country. Let me know. Which way do you see them when you do your travels throughout your great states? That would help me, because I'm, working up a story on that. So, be my grassroots on that one.
I'll give you mine from Northern Indiana. It's kind of, I think this has been kind of interesting here, in that you don't see a whole lot of presidential signs. In fact, you see virtually no Biden signs. There are a few. You do see more Trump signs, but in my local state representative race, you are seeing a whole bunch of signs for the Democratic challenger and very few for the Republican incumbent. So kind of mixed signals there. Yeah,
absolutely. Now, someone, and again, these are things I'm checking out. Someone told me that in general, Democrats charge for their signs and Republicans don't. Well, that could be a reason. I don't know whether that's true or not, but I'm going to check that out to see if that's the case.
Well, now
Trump signs all across Missouri, Nick Urish.
Oh, well, there you go.
I would confirm that from my family who lives in Missouri. That's Trump land.
Yeah, well, and another one, I hear Christina saying lots of Trump signs in southern Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Christina.
Yeah.
Instant feedback. I love this.
I do too. Well, and you'd think the Democrats would just be charging the top 1% for their signs, but who knows?
That's a little snarky. That's a little true, but snarky.
True, yeah. All right. Well, on that note, let's wrap it up before we get too slap happy, Jim.
Sure.
That's Jim Wiesmeyer from Pro Farmer. I'm John Harris from Farm Journal. Thanks for joining us this week on DC Signal to Noise.